Hello and welcome to this interview that is part of the summit that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to lay a strong foundation for health and happiness in our teenage girls. Today, I feel so honoured to have with us Jo Whitton. Jo is a blogger, author and speaker who loves to share her passion for healthy eating and healing food. She began by writing a food blog in 2008 called Quirky Cooking, and has close to 300,000 avid fans on Facebook alone. Jo has two best-selling cookbooks, Quirky Cooking and Life-Changing Food, a podcast called A Quirky Journey, online programs, and runs health retreats and events across Australia. Like so many other mums, her passion and knowledge has grown from taking on the challenges of repairing her own health and the health of her family. And in that long list of credentials, Jo, I didn't even mention that you managed to homeschool 4 children amongst all of that. It's very, very impressive. Thank you so much for being here today, Jo.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start with, what put you on this journey? What was the catalyst for?
The same word. That was good.
For you being on this journey and the work that you do.
Okay. As you said in the intro, for many of us, it's our children that get us started on our health journeys. I was struggling with my health growing up myself, but I think it was when my kids started having problems that I got the kick in the pants I needed to actually do something a bit more about it. So beginning with my own childhood, I was raised, my mum really cooked everything from scratch. She did everything with whole foods. She did the best she could. She did an awesome job, and she taught us all how to cook that way as well. So growing up in Cairns, when it used to be, this is Far North Queensland, when it used to be like 14,000 people, little country town, and not anymore. But it was very much, we grew a lot of food ourselves in the backyard, beautiful tropical produce all year round. We had the lovely produce at the local markets. Every weekend we would buy produce there, like boxfuls of stuff, and Mum would always never let anything go to waste. So she was a great example of cooking from scratch and using what you've got and never wasting things, and just using basic ingredients. And the reason for that was because we didn't have a lot of money, so it was the cheapest way to do it. She even made all our own breads, cakes, biscuits. If we had pizza or anything like that, it was all homemade, which was absolutely delicious. And I used to, like, all my friends used to follow me home from school, and Mum would have fried apricot pies cooking or something, and we'd have the kids all from the neighbourhood would all run whenever Mum cooked bread, and they'd all come and cut off all the crusts, and we'd all eat that. And so she was an awesome cook and just really taught us from really young to get into the kitchen, to experiment. She really encouraged me to make up my own recipes from the time I was a little kid. They weren't all successes, but it was a really good training for me, because as I grew and got older, I realised that there were certain foods that I just didn't cope well with, dairy being the main one. When I was little, we didn't realise that was the problem. I just always had a runny nose. I always had colds and hay fever, really bad hay fever. Every morning I would wake up sneezing violently at like 6 a.m, drove my sister crazy because we had to share a room. And I always had, problems with a sick tummy. I always had trouble if I had dairy, which I didn't quite realise it when I was little, and Mum didn't either. But, I'd get the upset stomach and the headaches and things like that from dairy. And as I got older, it got worse. By the time I was in my late teens, I started to have the hormone problems and terrible period pain. I remember being at uni, and I would be on the floor in the bathroom. I'd shut the door of the hostel that I was staying in. I'd lock it, and I'd just lay on the floor, just rolling around groaning, because it was just so awful. And I went to doctors, nutritionists, dietitians through the hospital, that kind of thing. And I was put on the pill. I was put on strong medication for pain. I was very underweight. and I had bad acne. So I was given this terrible cream to put on my face that ate off the top layer of the skin. So there was nothing about healing the root cause. There was nothing about looking into why this is all happening. It was not work from the inside out, which is what we know now is what you need to do. It was just deal with the issue like a Band-Aid, stick a Band-Aid on it. And for things like the weight issues and the dairy problems, I was told by my nutritionist that I needed to sprinkle sustagen on all my food and that would help me to gain weight. Yum, not. I was told to take these little enzyme tablets every time I had dairy or to have soy products. Again, not so great for my hormones. I was eating food. Obviously, I was away from home, living away from home at this stage and eating junk, as well as I did have a hostel where we had house parents and they cooked for us, but it was, there was a lot of tinned vegetables and it wasn't really amazing food.
Not nourishing.
I just remember feeling like I'm sure there's something I could be doing with food that would help me, but I had no idea what. I wasn't studying anything to do with nutrition or cooking. I was studying art. And I was just like, but something in the back of my mind, I was always interested in healthy eating and trying to work it out. And back then there wasn't the help with the internet. There wasn't blogs and things to go to. I didn't have a computer. Back then it was very, very basic. Like if you were looking for help with food, you went and bought a cookbook. So I didn't have much money. I was a uni student. So I'd go and buy secondhand cookbooks. And, even when I was first married and had kids, it was all just, I'd dig through secondhand stores looking for cookbooks and trying to figure out health stuff and research it myself. But yeah, things got worse as I got older. I started to, sorry, my dog's making a noise. It's my dog's turn to be noisy. So my health did get worse as I got older. I had more and more struggles with my weight, just really low weight. And I would eat like crazy. Like my friends were amazed at how much I ate. And I would have to eat at least 6 times a day, like small meals. And I just couldn't absorb the nutrients in my food. Sorry. Is that noisy?
No, I'm not hearing it. No.
He's cuddling up on the beanbag. So then I really had to think, well, what can I do to improve my health? And I had to try and work it out myself. I didn't mention I started when the kids were little, they started to have the same sort of issues. So Isaac especially, he's my third. He was very underweight, and I think when he was about 9 months old, I was keeping really careful track of, with my kids, I really kept track of their growth charts and how many wheeze and poos they did and all that. I was one of those mothers and wrote everything down in charts. And so I'd take it to the doctor and say, he hasn't done a poo for nearly 2 weeks. What's going on? And it was all to do with not getting enough food. By then I was having trouble breastfeeding. They just weren't getting the milk that they needed. And so then I had to add formula to the mix. He was constipated. He was always like struggling. And then as they got older, you could really see that it was food intolerances. And so with my fourth, I had a lot of trouble breastfeeding her, and I was told she is reacting to something in your milk. So I started to be really careful with dairy around that stage. And I had sort of been up and down with it. And sorry, my daughter's just about to burst into the room. I'm doing an interview. Sorry. I'm using her room.
It's all good, Jo.
So I had to learn how to start changing my diet. And so my early training really helped me with that, because instead of focusing on, oh, I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't have all these foods, I focused on, okay, what can I have and what can I make with those ingredients? Because that's what my mum had taught me from really young anyway. What have we got in the cupboard? What's in the garden? What's cheap at the markets this week, what's on the throw out at the supermarket. That's how we cooked growing up. And so when I had to change my diet and start to pull back, I was like, okay, well, what can I make with this, and this? And so that creativity really helped with my cooking. And so I began like pulling back on the dairy, and then I started going to a naturopath. And this was when things really started to change for me, because for the first time of seeing a medical professional type person, I was actually told, yes, food is important and you should do something with food. And I was like, yes, I knew it. It was there inside of me, and I just had never been helped with that sort of thing. So I remember my first naturopath, he really explained to me the importance of having a healthy gut and healing the gut lining, and about leaky gut and about gut health, all of that kind of. I'd never heard that stuff before, and it was pretty new back then. That was like, I'm trying to think, it would have been 13 years ago. He started explaining all that to me, and I remember him drawing pictures for me, and it was, most of it just went over my head. You know how it is when you first start hearing something, it's just like, you can only take so much in, and you just have to keep hearing it over and over before it really sinks in, for most of us. And so I started doing little bits, and it was just a gradual journey of working on little things one at a time. And I was like Mum, cooking most things from scratch, and I started to grind my own grains and make my own flours. And then I went from wheat, like bought wheat flour, to home ground, stone ground spelt. And then I went, okay, I think I actually need to go gluten-free. So I went mostly gluten-free, pulled back the dairy, pulled back the sugars, started using just natural sweeteners, and just gradually worked my way along. Cindy O'Meara's book, Changing Habits, Changing Lives, came into my life at about that time. And that was awesome. That helped me so much because it gave me the why behind everything. And so then I was like, right, now I understand. And you're much more likely to change when you know the why. And that really helped. I started to change a lot of different habits and started working on different areas of my diet. And I started to see improvements really quickly. I still had a lot of trouble with my weight. It was very difficult for me to gain weight. I remember doing everything my naturopath said for a year, and it was like I was having banana smoothies that were like this big for breakfast with a full meal breakfast. I was having like 6 meals a day still, but more nutrient dense foods. Well, better than I had been having. It was still not perfect. And I was really working on that. And with a lot of work and a lot of effort, I actually did gain 5 kilos. I got down to 42 kilos before this at 35 years old.
Yeah, wow.
And so, yeah, that was pretty skinny. And exhausted, and all the headaches and the colds and the chest infections. Every month I would get a cold. Whenever I got my period, it would just bring my immune system down, and it was just a real struggle. So I started to improve, and the kids were doing better, and we went through a few years of just gradual improvement and working on things. And it's always a little bit of a roller coaster. I think most families find that as your kids are getting older, especially, it's harder to keep the diet clean and good. It's difficult because they're out and about, they're at friends' places. They're, by the time they got to the teenage years, I had 4 teenagers all at once for a while there. And, they're off with friends, and they're doing camp outs, and they're going to parties and sleepovers, and it's very difficult to keep everything steady with the food. And I would really see a pattern, especially by the time Isaac got to, well, he always struggled with constipation if he had dairy. I remember him having a McDonald's ice cream. I know, bad, hey. And he got constipated so bad that it took about 2 weeks before that cleared up. And he was just exhausted, like laying on his bed, lethargic. And I was like, wow, I've really got to keep an eye on this. And he was always my most sensitive one. And so he started to struggle really badly at about 11. As puberty sort of starts to kick in, that's when you often see teenagers or young, just pre-teens, you start to see the anxiety and the mood swings and that kind of thing really kicking in, and that is so food and gut related. So when you do start seeing that, if you do start seeing that with your girls, just remember it's not just it's a hormonal thing and there's nothing you can do about it. It's so much depends on their diet and their gut health, and it can be improved with that. Hormones are very much affected by gut health. So anyway, Isaac got a bit rocky around 11 years old. And at that time I was writing my first cookbook. And I remember I was also a manager with Thermomix. I was traveling a bit. I was doing a lot of work and I was homeschooling. And so I would have him sitting on my lap at the computer while I worked on the cookbook. I would have him under my arm while I cooked. He was always with me because he just wasn't coping at all. He was very anxious and I couldn't figure it out. But I thought, again, a gut instinct said to me, pull his diet back. And by this time I'd been hearing more about gut health. And I'd been hearing more about the benefits of going grain-free. And I thought, well, I'm going to try grain-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. I did that for a week and his health just shot back up to good again. And I was like, wow, in 1 week. And so, his moods, like, he wasn't perfect, but it definitely leveled out and it was much more bearable. And he sort of went through a good stage again for a while. And, when things are going really well, you go, well, we can have a little bit of dairy. We can have a little bit of sugar. Oh, we're out and we're just going to have a hamburger. We're just going to have a packet of chips. It'll be okay. We're going to have an ice cream. Everything's okay as long as we don't do it too much. Everything in moderation, especially, when you're around grandma. And, and it just got a little bit rocky again. And then it suddenly went downhill. And I feel like it was very much the bucket syndrome, where you're just slowly putting things in the bucket. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then one day it all overflows. And one day it really did overflow for Isaac. So he had gotten quite obsessive about computer games, which is a very common thing at that age, 13. And I hadn't actually noticed how obsessed he was because I only let him play an hour or two a day. But apparently, he told me later that he could not stop thinking about it. He would draw it. He would think about it all day long when he was doing his school. It was just always on his mind, these Minecraft and these games that he played. And so one day he said to me, Mum, I think I'm going to have to stop playing computer games because I keep obsessing over them. And I said, okay, that's good. I'm glad you made that decision yourself. And he stopped. And then the next day, he just had a major crash. And I think for him, the obsessions and the anxiety and everything, if he had something to really focus on, it sort of propped him up. And when we took that obsession away, he just crashed. And obviously it wasn't just a mental health issue. It was a gut health issue because that affects your brain. And I knew that. I'd been hearing a lot about gut health by this stage, and I had researched a little bit, read a bit about the GAPS diet, but I was like, well, we don't need that. And I had sort of thought, well, that's really good for people that need help with major healing, but we're fine. And we're just, we're fine just having 80-20.
Yeah.
But then when Isaac crashed so badly, I was like, right, gut health. So I started really picking people's brains like Cindy O'Meara and Damien Christoph and Jude Bleureau and Brett Hill and all these friends in the health world that I knew understood this stuff. And I was like, what do I do? How can I heal this? How can I heal him? And we really talked through it all. And they were all in agreement that it was gut health related. And I remember talking to Jude Bleureau about it, and she's very much a proponent of GAPS for deep healing and then getting back to whole foods. And she said to me, tell me about the rest of the family's health. And I'm thinking, well, we're not so bad. It's just Isaac we need to work on. And so I started talking about it with her, and I was like, well, India's 17 and she has candida and she struggles with sugar addiction, and she gets these tingling feelings all in her face. And then she gets her muscles just all cramp up in her arms, and she just goes like claws, and she lays there and cries, and I have to massage it and, you know, put magnesium oil and give her magnesium and try and get that to calm down. And she's got terrible mood swings, and she, you know, I was thinking of all these things that she had, and then I thought, and my oldest son, who's 15 at the time, he has really bad problems with his sinuses and all the stuff that I grew up having trouble with, the hay fever, the colds, the runny nose, the snoring. Well, I don't know if I snored, but he did. I say I didn't. And he was very much struggling with brain fog, struggling with school, clumsy. So that's all things that are gut health related. Cassia, my youngest, she had a bit of eczema. She was probably the healthiest of all the kids, but yeah, there was a bit of eczema there. And then myself, we all, you know, struggled a bit with dairy, and I had the food intolerances and the thing, and I still hadn't gained enough weight. I was probably 46 kilos by then, maybe. And so it was really obvious to me, oh, we actually all need to do this. So I said to the kids, right, tomorrow we're starting GAPS. And I told them what it was, and there was like door slamming, crying from a couple of them. But Isaac was really on board because he had been researching with me and reading things on the internet. And this is really important for the teenagers. You know, they're old enough by that age that they need to understand the why behind things. If they'll read a book like Changing Habits, Changing Lives, definitely get them to read it. Yeah. If they will listen to podcasts, if they will even just read a short couple of articles online that are something to do with what they need help with. We really found that with Isaac, once he started to research it for himself and he understood how other people had gotten through, oh, by the way, he ended up being diagnosed with severe OCD and anxiety, and they put him straight onto medication, started seeing a psychologist, and I was like, right, this is not going to be forever. I'm going to get him off this medication. And that's why I said we're starting GAPS. So he, once he started researching it, he realized that people do get better from this, and that gave him hope. And once he had hope, he was ready to do something about it and not just lay on the floor and scream and cry, because that's what he'd been doing. He'd been, you know, just randomly throughout the day screaming and crying and throwing his arms around and just uncontrollable. And this is a really gentle, sweet, happy kid usually. He couldn't even feed himself. He got to the stage where at 13 I was spoon feeding him. So he, in his moments of lucidity, because they were like off and on, he would read and listen to me read him things. And so he decided, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get better. So he started researching the GAPS diet and what foods were allowed on each stage. And he had it all memorized because he's got that kind of brain. And so if I accidentally started to give him something he wasn't supposed to, no, Mum, that's not allowed till stage 2. He was really funny. But we got all the kids on board because I said to them, look, if this is going to help your brother, it's going to help all of us, because by that stage, no one was coping with his behavior and with the constant crying. So we jumped in, started GAPS, and within a week I went, okay, this is too hard, because I wasn't prepared. So we went back to full GAPS, which is a very varied diet. It's more it's more lenient, I guess you could say, or whatever you want to call it, than paleo. It's got dairy, it's got some legumes and things in there. So we started there, and then we worked our way back. When we were ready after about a month, then we began GAPS intro. And we saw improvements really quickly with Isaac and with the others. The girls, like I said, with India's candida and moods and the muscle aches and all of those kind of things, that all went away on early GAPS. Isaac's moods picked up really quickly, and in less than a year he was off all medication, and he's never been back on. That's 3 or 4 years now. He just became this really outgoing kid, and it was so beautiful to see. Within 6 months, he was up on stage speaking with Pete Evans about youth mental health in front of 200 people. This is a kid that couldn't leave his room. And he spoke with me at seminars, and he spoke at the Wellness Summit with me a couple of years ago in front of 900 people.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And he's just really taken off since we worked on that healing, and seeing the difference between okay, healthy whole foods are great, and that's what we need to focus on. But if you have deeper issues, you've got to go deeper, heal that, and then come back to the whole foods. And so we're back to the whole foods now, although we do keep quite a few GAPS meals in the weekly plan just to keep the health up. But mostly we're just whole foods. And I find that I see this with so many people, that it really can change your life. And that's why we made the cookbook Life-Changing Food. And we found that when you start eating this way, it's so simple. It makes so much sense. And you're just like, why wasn't I eating this way before? And why doesn't the whole world eat like this? It's just common sense.
Yeah.
And we've just gotten so far away from that in our society. And we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing kids with anxiety at really young ages, even suicidal, and it's not a personality thing. It's an imbalance in their body. It's something to do with their gut. It's the microbiome. We get emails all the time from parents that are really struggling with their kids, and we've had an email from a mum saying, my 5-year-old girl is suicidal. What do I do? And why is it starting so young? Why is it even happening at all? And I think getting back to the foundation of a really healthy, nourishing, nutrient-dense diet that heals the body and keeps it on an even keel and keeps the microbiome healthy is just so, so important. So that's my passion, and that's what I really love to share.
That theme of anxiety has just come up. There's 23 speakers on this summit now, and it's just come up over and over and over again. It's just so prevalent, and something that so many families are trying to get their heads around how to deal with it. And so it's great to hear your story, Jo, and to get yet another perspective on how to start addressing this. One of the golden things that I take away from your story is that moment of thinking about your other children whose symptoms aren't so obvious, and going, no, we're all basically fine. And I think as a society, it's become so normal to be fairly chronically unwell, with whether it's recurring PMS, headaches, itchy skin, all these things. It's become so normal, and it comes into the way that we think about things, and you just have to deal with it, and there's no thought process that comes via the medical association that we can actually change it, and that's not normal.
Yeah, I forgot to say, with my weight, within like all those years of working so hard to try and get my weight up by force feeding myself, basically, and that wasn't the answer. The answer was to heal the gut. And when I healed the gut, then I could receive the nourishment from my food, and I was eating high nutrient, nutrient dense foods, and I wasn't eating the starchy fillers and the stuff that really doesn't do much good. That was just out of the diet. And I gained near 8 to 10 kilos in 1 year.
Yeah.
So when I look at the difference, like how the photos pop up on Facebook from a year ago, I love that, because I always look at myself a year back or 2 years back and go, whoa. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. I can remember seeing you speak for the first time on a stage, and I remember hearing subsequently that you'd got yourself there, and it was while Isaac was at his absolute worst.
Yes,
and I just remember being just about in tears listening to the story, Jo. I just can't even begin to imagine what it was like.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. That was the Wellness Summit where we had just started GAPS, and Isaac was still not in a great way. He'd only just begun working through GAPS, and it was it was very hard because I wasn't at the stage then where I could even talk about it. I talked about it to like the speakers privately, but I didn't speak about it much on stage because I would have burst into tears. And it took me 6 months before I could talk about it because it was a really rough time. And if anyone wants to know more about the story and from Isaac's viewpoint, because I think if you've got kids going through anxiety, especially teenagers, it's really good to hear it from another teenager's perspective and their thoughts and how they got through it, because Isaac is really good at verbalizing his thoughts, and a lot of kids aren't, and so parents don't realize what they're going through. They don't understand what's going on in their heads, and at first my husband didn't understand, and he would get angry at Isaac when he was like going ballistic, losing the plot, screaming for no reason. He was like, he's just doing it for attention. I'm like, no, there's something terribly wrong. This is not him. And once we got to the stage where he'd calmed down enough that he could talk about it, then we understood more that he felt like he was in another world that he couldn't get out of. He couldn't escape. And he could see that we were in a different world and that his was not reality, but he couldn't escape it. And he had to do the things that his brain told him to do or he would die. So, you know, him explaining how he felt and how he got through that time and what helped from another young person, from one young person to another, I think it's really important. And so he has done a podcast where he completely explains all that. And if you like, I can give you the link for that. And we also talk about it, quite often at seminars and things.
I just, you know, from a healing perspective, I just love the empowering message in all this, that he can now take control of his own health through, you know, the power of food. And it's not having to outsource that help, you know, through doctors or getting medications or whatever. He can now manage that himself, and to be in such an empowered position is what a gift. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the biggest benefits of GAPS for all of us. Learning to tune into our own bodies, for one thing. How important is that to teach your kids to learn to tune into their own body and to see when they're going downhill and go, right, I know what to do to fix this. And that they can do that themselves. They can be proactive. They know what to do now. So they can, you know, go out on their own now. And sure, they're probably going to eat rubbish sometimes and do all the things that I'll be like, no, don't eat that, which I do sometimes. But they know what to do. And so like when Isaac has a bit of a bad day and he's feeling anxious, he knows, oh, I've been eating sugar, or I had such and such, and it's starting to make me feel yuck again. So for them to understand that is I think that's been one of the best things about doing GAPS for us.
And it is that picture of, you know, it really doesn't matter too much what we're talking about, whether it's talking about our girls struggling with their skin, or whether they're struggling with their weight, or whether they're struggling with anxiety, all these different, you know, headaches, PMS, whether it's physical or mental. There is so much power in just starting with the gut and gut health. And, you know, this is a message that doesn't come necessarily from the medical association. I know I took one of my girls in, she had a little wart on her finger that she had to get burnt off. And the doctor said, oh, you know, is there anything else? And she said, oh, I'm not really very happy with my skin. And anyway, the conversation went around and the doctor said, well, you know, people like to believe that food plays a role in that, but there's no proof of it. And, you know...
Did you slap him?
Yeah, it's, you know, I can see Zoe just kind of looks at me and it's like, yeah, it's it. But
wow,
we have different opinions, we have different thought processes, and it's just, you know, part of doing this interview series is to give a different perspective, different story.
It just amazes me still in this day and age that is not a common viewpoint, that food heals, because I've seen it with so many people that now it feels like mainstream to me, because I see it every day, and I have heard so many amazing stories and seen it in our own family. And so for when someone says that, I just look at them like they're from another planet. I'm like, what? I went to the doctor with when I was having some trouble with hormones a while back, and you know, I've still got problems from back years and years ago that I'm still dealing with. And I went to the doctors, and I had a student doctor who, he was in his 4th year, and he said, so how are you working on this? And I said, well, I'm doing, you know, a lot of work on my gut. I'm working on gut health. And he's going, what do you mean by that? Are you taking medication? I'm like, no, like eating foods that heal the gut and working on gut health and the microbiome. And he's like, no, sorry, what do you mean? He's like, I've never heard of this. And he had no idea what I was talking about. And he just looked at me like I was an absolute fruitcake. And I looked at him like he was an absolute fruitcake. But the sad thing is, I thought, why aren't they learning this?
Yeah.
Why aren't they learning that it's so foundational for your health? I think it is coming in now more, but it's just really sad to me that this is something so simple.
Yeah.
And it was such a part of traditional society, even though they didn't know the science behind it. They ate in a way that kept them healthy, and now, you know, our society's gotten away from that. It's so sad.
Yeah. I have a doctor on this summit who's doing all sorts of incredible and amazing things, and I actually said to her that I feel for doctors in our society because they've been given this godlike power, or, you know, people look at them as having these godlike skills, that they know everything, and they've got the most incredible knowledge base for crisis care. You know, if I break my arm or leg, thank goodness they're there.
Well, my hormone issues ended up in emergency surgery, so I was very thankful for the medical system.
Absolutely.
But there's some things that they still need to work on.
Well, absolutely. But also, you know, for the general public to know, you know, I'm thinking, I'm sitting here in a woolen jumper and we're going into cold and flu season, which we do here in Victoria.
Fun of Queensland.
And, you know, I know that this is when, you know, everyone starts getting sick and everyone's grabbing their Sudafeds or whatever. Whereas, you know, there is a different way to go about it.
Yeah.
There's that way. And then there's the, well, let's make sure that we're getting all our veggies and our broths and our things so that our bodies have the ability to, you know, if we get sick, which is perfectly normal, we have the, you know, the immune system that helps us, you know, get over it quickly and heal properly. And it's just a different way of thinking, isn't it? And
I love it when I see doctors and naturopaths and nutritionists and GAPS practitioners working together, because we do need a balanced viewpoint. And we're definitely not anti-doctor in our family. My husband works at the hospital. But it's just, I would just love to see nutrition as a bigger part of medicine. Yeah, but then, you know, they might take some of my job away, and that's we got to share the love. Just all work together. That would be nice.
Yeah. Jo, we're almost getting to the end of our time together. I know that you have a free gift for our audience. Did you want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to offer a discount for you guys if you would like to sign up for our online gut health program. We have a program that helps with healing, cooking for healing the gut. So it is based on the GAPS intro protocol. So if you're, you know, just working on whole foods and you're not really needing to do deep healing, you can still use the recipes in the program and just use them randomly, and, you know, oh, that's a nice recipe, I'll cook that one tonight. And there's cooking videos and things like that. If you're working on deep healing, so you've got maybe allergies, intolerances, you've got autoimmune issues, maybe you've got problems with hormones, and you know, there's eczema, there's so many reasons to work on gut health, and most of us need to work on it a little bit. Anxiety, mood swings, fibromyalgia, there's so many reasons. So if you do struggle with these things and you want to try and do some work on that, the program's really good for supporting you for that. So it has you get the program all at once, so you can just go in and use whatever bits you want, or you can start from the beginning and work through. You know, it depends where you're at. But like I said, for us, we ended up beginning with just full GAPS recipes and just using bits and pieces until we were ready to go a bit more hardcore, and then we went back to stage 1 of intro. I would really recommend looking into what GAPS is before if you want to buy the program, maybe look into what that is first. If you go to our website, quirkycooking.com.au, you can click on the Where to Start tab, and it will show have a section in there about what is GAPS, and there's an article about how to get started with GAPS, and that's really just about getting back to whole foods. And then we also have the GAPS program linked from the website, and there's the podcasts, so you can listen to those and get an idea of what we do and what's helped us. And we interview a lot of different practitioners and mums and all sorts of people. But if you want to purchase the program and you'd like to have someone holding your hand and walking you through gut healing, and also just beautiful recipes that will help to nourish your family, and a really awesome support group on Facebook, which is a closed group. You can't find it unless you're part of the program, and we have a GAPS practitioner and a naturopath in there to answer questions. And that's just forever. It's just a lifetime membership, so it's very helpful. And we'll give you 10% off the program.
Oh, that's amazing, Jo. Thank you so much.
No worries.
So for the mums with teenage girls that are tuned into this, as a mum who's been a teenager and you've got two teenage daughters, if you could give one really empowering message for them to take away, and I'm putting you on the spot, what comes to your heart? What's the most empowering message that you can leave them with?
I think it sort of covers all areas of parenting, really, not just teaching them healthy living, but spend the time with them. That's the most important thing that I've found in our journey in all areas. So when Isaac was going through so much of the anxiety issues, it was the time and just having him there by my side and spending that time to constantly talk through his fears, and to be able to spend the time to cook for him, to nourish him, and to research the things that we needed to know. And it takes a lot of time to be a parent. It's full on, but it won't be forever. Like they'll probably be in your home for 18 or 20 years or something, maybe longer. But they're going to be gone, and just put in that groundwork of when they're younger than teenagers, when they're little, spend the time talking to them, and every day have conversations, have them by your side working with you in the kitchen, so that they see how you cook and how you make things and what your thought processes are. Speak out loud while you're doing it. Have them, there with you when you are learning about these things, and discuss it as a family, discuss it at the dinner table, chat about it in the car, put a podcast on in the car. Like, just spend time sharing what you're learning, and sharing your thoughts and listening to their thoughts, and just really build that close relationship with them. I think one of the things I've seen that helps the most with kids with anxiety and struggling with maybe body image, or all the teenage angst, if they have a parent or two parents that really take that time to talk to them and listen to them, it just helps no end. So I think that's the most important thing. And speaking to a psychologist about this, she said, you've hit the nail on the head. She said, we call that the M vitamin, the mummy vitamin. And she said that's one of the most important things for healing, is having your mum and hopefully your dad close by, ready to talk and ready to listen at all times. And it's just so important.
There's another speaker on this summit called Kim McCabe, and she does year-long mentoring programs with teenage girls in England. She's really a phenomenal woman, and that was her core message in her interview.
Oh,
as
beautiful.
well.
I can't wait to hear that one.
Yeah, just spending time.
Yeah. it's so simple. And it's hard for us sometimes, but we got to do it.
It is hard because it often comes up, when you just want to crawl into bed yourself, and then suddenly somebody needs...
That's when teenagers wake up and want to talk. 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but I think the golden nugget is that these solutions are simple. It's simple in nature. It's not always so easy to implement them, but they are simple. And the more we keep these conversations going and support each other as mums, the more we can help our girls to thrive. So thank you so much, Jo. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.